Jill Biden challenged. Bondi to an IQ test. 36 seconds later, Bondi unsealed a letter that crushed her. Pam Bondi strode into the Rayburn House office building in Washington, D.C., exuding the kind of poised assurance that came from years of handling intense legal and political battles. The building itself, a historic structure, with its grand marble corridors and ornate details, stood as a symbol of the nation's legislative heart. But today, the focus was on room 2141, where a high-profile panel on education funding reform was set to unfold. The space was alive with the low hum of conversation, the clack of keyboards from journalists, and the faint whir of cameras adjusting their focus for the live stream. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting a warm glow on the long wooden table at the center, flanked by microphones, water glasses, and stacks of policy documents. Bondi, dressed in a sharp navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, her blonde hair neatly pinned back to reveal a determined expression, took her seat with purposeful grace. She placed her black leather briefcase beside her chair, its contents carefully organized, not just the usual briefs and charts, but something extra, a safeguard she'd tucked away for moments, exactly like this. Invited for her expertise in advocating efficient state-level solutions that prioritized accountability and community involvement. Bondi scanned the room, noting the mix of attendees, policy experts in suits, educators with notepads at the ready, staffers whispering into phones, and a scattering of journalists poised to capture every word. The online audience was already building viewers from across the country, tuning in via the live stream, expecting a thoughtful debate on how to revamp school funding formulas to better serve students in diverse communities. Bondi knew better than to assume it would stay routine. These forums could turn on a dime, and she was ready, her mind sharp, and her arguments honed like a well-crafted legal brief. As the panel kicked off, moderator Lynette Harmon, a veteran journalist with a reputation for fairness and poise from her days at PBS, welcomed everyone with a nod to the bipartisan spirit of the event. Today, we're here to discuss innovative ways to balance equity and excellence in our education system, she said, her voice steady and inviting. Bondi was called on first, and she leaned into her microphone, her tone confident yet approachable, drawing on her experience to outline a conservative approach that emphasized local empowerment over federal overreach. Education reform isn't about pouring endless resources into a broken system. It's about smart, targeted investments that give power back to parents and teachers on the ground. She explained, citing specific successes from Florida, where voucher programs had empowered families in underserved areas, leading to measurable improvements, like a 20% increase in reading proficiency scores in participating districts. She pulled up a chart on the shared screen pointing to data lines that showed how fiscal prudence could yield better outcomes without bloating budgets, her words flowing with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. The audience responded positively, with nods from several panelists and quick notes scribbled by observers, while online comments began to trickle in praising her straightforward style. Bondi continued weaving in examples of how community-driven initiatives had transformed schools in rural and urban settings alike, stressing that true progress came from accountability measures that rewarded results rather than just spending. Seated opposite her First Lady Jill Biden, a dedicated educator and advocate with a deep commitment to public schools, listened intently. At first, her hands clasped on the table, her expression one of engaged interest. Biden, known for her passionate defense of federal programs aimed at closing opportunity gaps, responded with her own perspective, advocating for comprehensive national standards and increased centralized funding to tackle systemic issues head-on. We can't leave it to chance. Every child deserves access to quality education regardless of where they live, she said, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who'd spent decades in classrooms. The back and forth was initially productive, with Bondi countering by highlighting potential inefficiencies in broad federal mandates using data from various states to illustrate how localized flexibility often led to more innovative solutions. Biden pushed back, emphasizing the need for holistic support systems that addressed not just funding, but also teacher training and infrastructure. The discussion gained momentum, the room's energy building as points were exchanged, but beneath the surface, a subtle tension simmered, differing philosophies clashing in ways that went beyond mere policy details. As the conversation delved deeper into specifics, like debating the merits of merit-based teacher incentives versus uniform salary scales. The second hour approached and the atmosphere thickened with the weight of unresolved disagreements. Then, in a moment that caught everyone off guard, Biden leaned forward again, her smile turning a shade sharper, as if deciding to pivot the dialogue in a more personal direction. Pam, with your focus on cutting costs and local tweaks, maybe we should settle this the old-fashioned way, both take an IQ test and see whose approach really holds up, she said, her words delivered with a light touch, but landing with undeniable edge, a challenge that hung in the air like a sudden chill. The room reacted instantly, a collective intake of breath from the audience, a few muffled whispers from the press row, and one staffer nearly dropping their coffee cup in surprise. Lynette Harmon's eyes widened briefly, her professional mask slipping for a split second as she glanced between the two women, the live stream's chat exploding with reactions from viewers who sensed the shift from policy to provocation. The jab wasn't screamed or laced with venom, but its quiet confidence made it all the more piercing, aimed directly at questioning Bondi's intellectual credentials in front of a national audience. Bondi, however, remained unflappable, her composure a shield honed from countless courtroom confrontations. She met Biden's gaze steadily, a faint hint of a smile playing at her lips, not one of amusement, but of quiet resolve. "That's quite the proposal," she replied, her voice even and laced with a subtle Southern inflection that added warmth to her words. "But if we're talking about settling things, perhaps I have something right here that can contribute to the conversation." The audience edged forward in their seats, a wave of anticipation rippling through the room as phones were discreetly raised to record. With deliberate movements, Bondi reached for her briefcase, her fingers deftly undoing the latch without a hint of haste. From a dedicated inner compartment, she extracted a pristine white envelope, its surface smooth and unblemished, save for the elegant golden embossment of the Congressional Testing Initiative CTI seal, a program designed to evaluate leaders' cognitive strengths in areas like problem-solving and strategic thinking. She placed it gently on the table, sliding it toward the center with a soft push, where it came to rest equidistant between her and Biden. The room fell into a hushed silence, broken only by the faint click of camera shutters and the rapid tapping of keyboards from journalists capturing the unexpected turn. Biden's expression shifted subtly, a brief flicker of surprise crossing her features as she stared at the envelope, realizing this wasn't a bluff. Lynette, ever the professional, cleared her throat to regain control. "Ms. Bondi, is this what I think it is, your results from the CTI assessment?" Bondi nodded affirmatively, her demeanor calm and collected. "Indeed, it is. I had it sealed for situations just like this." Whispers erupted anew, a blend of astonishment and intrigue, as the live stream's viewer numbers skyrocketed, surpassing 2 million in mere moments. Biden leaned back slightly, her fingers drumming lightly on the table, probing further. "You're not kidding around." "Not at all." Bondi affirmed, her tone resolute, yet polite, leaning back in her chair with folded hands, projecting an aura of unshakable preparedness. Lynette consulted quickly with the panel's legal advisor, who shook their head initially citing privacy protocols, but Bondi interjected smoothly. As the owner of this document, I give full permission for it to be opened here and now. With a sense of ceremony, Lynette grasped the envelope, her hands steady, despite the charged atmosphere, and carefully tore the seal. The audience held its collective breath, the tension palpable, as she unfolded the single sheet inside her eyes, scanning the printed results before voicing them aloud for all to hear. Analytical reasoning, 98th percentile. Spatial logic, 97th percentile. Executive processing, 95th percentile. Overall ranking, top 2%. The words echoed through the room, met not with cheers, but with a profound quiet, the implications sinking in like a decisive verdict in a trial. Bondi sat there, expression neutral, allowing the facts to stand on their own merit, while Biden's face registered a momentary pause, her response a measured, "That's certainly noteworthy," though her voice carried a hint of strain. Lynette, sensing the need to pause, announced a short recess. But the panel had irrevocably changed, transformed from a standard policy talk into a captivating spectacle with Bondi's strategic reveal at its core. This wasn't merely a comeback. It was a demonstration of foresight and intellectual fortitude, underscoring Bondi's ability to turn potential adversity into a showcase of strength. As the recess commenced, whispers turned to animated discussions among staffers, journalists firing off initial reports, and the online world igniting with clips of the moment going viral. Almost instantly, hashtags trending as users lauded Bondi's poise. She didn't bask in the attention, instead methodically organizing her materials, her mind already pivoting back to the substantive issues at hand. But the impact was undeniable. The envelope had become a symbol, a quiet yet powerful affirmation that preparation and competence could outshine any unexpected challenge, setting the foundation for a story that would extend far beyond the confines of that Washington room, inspiring reflections on leadership readiness and the true measure of intellect in public service. To fully appreciate the tension that erupted during that pivotal education panel in the Rayburn House office building, one must trace back to the simmering differences in philosophy and approach between Pam Bondi and First Lady Jill Biden, differences that had been building through a series of prior engagements hearings and policy skirmishes centered on how best to reform America's education system. Bondi, with her background as a prosecutor and advocate for accountable governance, had long championed policies that prioritized local decision-making, fiscal efficiency, and measures to ensure taxpayer dollars delivered real results in classrooms, often drawing on examples from Florida's initiatives like expanded school choice options that empowered parents to select the best fit for their children. Her views emphasized reducing bureaucratic red tape from Washington, arguing that states and communities knew their needs better than distant federal mandates, a stance she articulated with the precision of a legal argument, backed by data showing improved outcomes in districts where flexibility was key. Biden, on the other hand, advocated for robust federal involvement to promote equity, pushing for nationwide standards, and increased funding to address disparities, viewing education as a national priority, requiring centralized support to uplift underserved populations. These contrasting visions, Bondi's focus on empowerment through choice and accountability versus Biden's emphasis on comprehensive federal frameworks, had clashed repeatedly in various forums, not through overt hostility, but through pointed debates that highlighted their fundamental disagreements on the role of government in shaping young minds. The rivalry's origins could be pinpointed to a subcommittee hearing several months earlier, held in a nondescript conference room on Capitol Hill, where the topic was revising federal grant distributions for public schools. Bondi, invited as an expert on state-level implementations, presented a detailed proposal for streamlining funding to reward performance-based metrics, such as tying allocations to graduation rates and proficiency scores rather than blanket increases. She illustrated her points with charts from Florida's experience, where voucher programs had allowed low-income families to access higher-performing schools, resulting in a notable uptick in student achievements without proportional budget hikes. "It's about getting results, not just spending more," Bondi stated firmly, her voice carrying the conviction of someone who'd seen wasteful programs drain resources in her prosecutorial days. Biden, participating remotely via video link, interjected with concerns about how such approaches might exacerbate inequalities, advocating instead for mandates that incorporated diversity and inclusion metrics to ensure funds addressed broader societal issues. The exchange grew sharper as Bondi countered with evidence from conservative-led states showing that localized incentives fostered innovation like public-private partnerships that brought tech resources to rural classrooms, arguing that over-reliance on federal strings often led to one-size-fits-all solutions that stifled progress. From there, the friction escalated in a joint task force meeting focused on curriculum standards, where Bondi voiced strong opposition to expansive federal guidelines that she believed infringed on state rights, particularly those pushing for certain diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) elements in school policies. Drawing from her experience enforcing laws in Florida, Bondi highlighted potential pitfalls, such as how mandatory DEI training could divert time and money from core subjects like math and reading, citing reports from educators who felt burdened by additional compliance requirements. She proposed alternatives, like merit-based teacher incentives and parental involvement programs using data to show how these had boosted engagement in diverse communities without top-down directives. Biden, countering with her educator's perspective, stressed the importance of national benchmarks to combat biases and ensure all students felt represented, leading to a back and forth that, while civil underscored their divide, Bondi's insistence on practical results-oriented reforms versus Biden's call for holistic, federally guided equity measures. Bondi didn't back down, methodically breaking down economic models that projected long-term savings from efficient spending, quipping that we can't educate our kids if we're drowning in unnecessary red tape, a line that resonated with attendees skeptical of expanding government roles. These interactions weren't isolated. They built upon a pattern seen in private briefings and public statements where Bondi's advocacy for conservative principles shone through. In one such briefing on equity proposals, she arrived armed with comprehensive dossiers, including case studies from successful initiatives in states like Texas, where school choice had empowered families and improved test scores across demographics. Her preparation was evident, cross-referencing data to anticipate counter-arguments, embodying a commitment to thoroughness that defined her approach. When Biden suggested that Bondi's ideas prioritized cost-cutting over comprehensive uplift, Bondi responded with a measured reminder that sustainable funding meant more resources for actual learning, not administrative overhead, a point that left a lasting impression on observers who noted her ability to dissect issues without resorting to emotional appeals. Bondi's style, always backed by empirical evidence from think tanks and state reports, refused to let sentiment override facts, making her a formidable voice for limited government solutions in education debates. As the months progressed, the rivalry gained momentum through media appearances and op-eds, where Bondi continued to articulate her vision for education reform. In a televised interview, she discussed the need for policies that rewarded excellence and accountability, pointing to Florida's efforts in combating wasteful spending and promoting parental rights in curriculum decisions. "Parents and local leaders are the best judges of what's right for their schools," she said, her words echoing a broader conservative ethos of self-reliance and community-driven change. Biden, in her own public engagements, highlighted the moral imperative of federal interventions to level the playing field, often framing opposition as short-sighted. Yet Bondi's responses remained unflinching, always grounded in real-world examples like how voucher systems had closed achievement gaps in urban areas by giving families options beyond failing public schools. This consistent advocacy not only built her a following among those wary of federal overreach, but also set the stage for the panel confrontation where her foresight in participating in the Congressional Testing Initiative, CTI, stemmed from recognizing that debates could veer into personal territory, especially when conservative viewpoints were dismissed as simplistic. Bondi's decision to enroll in the CTI, a voluntary program assessing cognitive skills essential for leadership, such as analytical reasoning and strategic processing, was a strategic extension of her preparation routine, much like reviewing legal briefs before a key case. She completed it discreetly, viewing it as a way to have concrete evidence of her acumen ready if needed, aligning with her principles of readiness and personal responsibility. This wasn't about seeking validation, but ensuring she could defend her policies and capacity effectively. In the lead-up to the education panel, Bondi's team ran mock sessions refining arguments on funding algorithms and equity studies, always framing positions around empowering educators at the ground level. Meanwhile, Biden seemed set to promote progressive advancements, perhaps underestimating Bondi's blend of legal rigor and relatable rhetoric. Prior clashes had established a pattern, Biden advancing inclusive reforms, Bondi countering with pragmatic safeguards that prioritized efficiency and choice. For instance, in a hearing on federal grants, Bondi used international comparisons to argue against uniform mandates, noting how countries with flexible systems outperformed rigid ones, emphasizing that you don't win by tying everyone's hands with the same rules. This showcased her global perspective, informed by years of studying models favoring market incentives in education. The build-up created an undercurrent of anticipation for the panel, where observers expected substantive fireworks, but not the personal twist. Bondi's choice to carry the sealed CTI results was a direct outgrowth of these experiences, a quiet assurance that if qualifications were questioned, she could respond with undeniable proof, upholding the dignity of her advocacy while exemplifying values of preparedness. As the rivalry's roots informed every exchange, Bondi's steady guidance kept discussions anchored in core issues, like spending accountability, her facts, and metaphors, weaving a narrative of thoughtful leadership that extended far beyond the immediate debates, hinting at broader implications for how education policy battles were waged in Washington. As the education panel in the Rayburn House office building drew to a close with moderator Lynette Harmon wrapping up the proceedings and thanking the participants for their insights, the true magnitude of Pam Bondi's envelope reveal began to cascade outward, like a stone skipped across a still pond, creating waves that extended far beyond the confines of room 2141 and into the digital ether where millions were already dissecting the moment. The live stream faded to credits, but the energy in the room lingered, a charged buzz that refused to dissipate. As staffers exchanged wide-eyed glances, journalists hammered away at their laptops, drafting instant recaps, and audience members fumbled for their phones to replay the clip that had just transformed a routine policy discussion into an unforgettable spectacle. Bondi, ever the picture of composure, gathered her materials with the same methodical efficiency she'd displayed throughout, sharing a brief knowing nod with her team before slipping out a side door, avoiding the immediate swarm of reporters who were already clamoring for quotes. But avoidance was futile in the age of instant sharing. Within minutes, snippets of the exchange flooded social media platforms with the envelope moment clipped, captioned and circulated under hashtags like Bondi Envelope and @prepared. Like Pam, trending nationwide as users from all walks of life weighed in on what they'd witnessed, a poised leader turning a provocative challenge into a display of unyielding intellect and grace. The viral surge was immediate and explosive, the viewer count on the original live stream spiking retrospectively as word spread, pushing the total past 3 million in under an hour, with platforms like X, formerly Twitter, lighting up with reactions that praised Bondi's handling as a masterstroke of humility and strategic acumen. Conservative commentators were among the first to amplify the narrative, hailing her response as emblematic of core values like preparation, resilience, and a steadfast commitment to facts over flair. With one popular podcast host declaring Pam Bondi didn't just defend herself, she reminded everyone what real leadership looks like in a world full of empty rhetoric. Even neutral observers chimed in, noting how her calm demeanor elevated the discourse, turning a potential sideshow into a substantive reminder that competence shines brightest under pressure. On X, the clip amassed over 5 million views in the first few hours, with users posting effusive comments such as, "That envelope drop was pure class. Bondi showed up ready and stayed cool," and, in a sea of political drama, Pam Bondi brings the receipts without the ego, reflecting a groundswell of support that transcended party lines. As everyday folks appreciated the way she redirected the focus back to policy without descending into pettiness. Media outlets jumped on the story, with fervor cable news channels interrupting regular programming to dissect the exchange in prime-time segments, where anchors replayed the footage in slow motion, analyzing Bondi's body language, her steady gaze, folded hands, and relaxed posture as textbook examples of confidence under fire. One major network commentator remarked, "This wasn't about winning a gotcha moment." Bondi elevated the entire conversation, proving that true smarts come through in how you handle adversity, while online forums buzzed with threads dedicated to breaking down the implications, users debating how her top-tier CTI scores validated her long-standing reputation as a keen policy analyst, from her work on budget efficiencies to equity evaluations. Conservative radio shows devoted entire blocks to the event, lauding how Bondi's quiet strength embodied the ethos of personal responsibility and readiness, linking it to her advocacy for taxpayer-friendly reforms that prioritized results over bureaucracy. The narrative quickly dominated news aggregators with headlines like, "Bondi's sealed surprise steals the education panel spotlight," and "From challenge to checkmate." Pam Bondi's viral victory, driving a surge in traffic to related education policy sites and even boosting donations to conservative-leaning education initiatives. Back in the immediate aftermath, as attendees spilled out into the building's corridors, the reactions were palpable and varied, with fellow panelists offering quiet words of admiration to Bondi's team. One colleague murmuring, "She handled that like a pro," kept it about the issues, not the insult. Journalists, sensing a story with legs, fired off preliminary articles that framed the incident as a triumph of preparation, emphasizing how Bondi's legal background equipped her to anticipate and neutralize such pivots. Social media influencers with massive followings began creating reaction videos, montages that spliced the envelope reveal with clips from Bondi's past public appearances, showcasing her consistent use of data-driven arguments and sharp wit to champion causes like school choice and fiscal accountability. One viral thread on Reddit's political subreddit garnered thousands of upvotes, with posts like, "Bondi didn't brag. She just proved her point and moved on." That's the kind of advocate we need more of, while young professionals shared stories of drawing inspiration from her poise in their own high-pressure meetings. The ripple effects extended swiftly to professional circles, with emails and messages flooding Bondi's office from educators and parents alike, many from Florida, expressing pride in her representation. A teacher from Miami penned a heartfelt note. "Watching you stay composed and focused inspired my classroom today. We talked about how preparation beats any challenge." Parents in rural districts took to social media to highlight how Bondi's advocacy had already impacted their communities through targeted programs that enhanced local school options, the viral moment amplifying their voices and drawing more attention to these successes. Even international media picked up the thread, framing it as a slice of American political theater where intellect prevailed over provocation, further polishing Bondi's image as a symbol of prudent, effective leadership. Late-night shows couldn't resist incorporating light-hearted skits that portrayed Bondi as the unflappable hero, using animated envelopes to crush debates, but always in a tone that celebrated her intellect rather than ridicule. As evening descended, the White House communications apparatus found itself fielding inquiries from reporters, now spinning the story around Bondi's ascendancy, prompting internal discussions on how to pivot without conceding ground. Yet Bondi herself steered clear of the limelight, declining interview requests to instead review feedback from the panel in a quiet office space, incorporating suggestions into her ongoing proposals for balanced funding models that blended local taxes with need-based aids modeled after proven systems in states emphasizing efficiency. This humility only fueled further acclaim, with polls emerging online showing heightened trust in her approach to education issues, voters valuing her analytical prowess and down-to-earth style. The immediate consequences weren't without their detractors, of course, with some voices attempting to downplay the moment as staged or irrelevant, but the predominant sentiment leaned heavily toward admiration for how Bondi maintained decorum, transforming tension into a teachable instance about the merits of readiness and respect in civic discourse. Conservative think tanks issued statements commending her defense of merit and foresight, tying it to larger themes of individual empowerment and limited government intervention, while social media algorithms propelled the content even further, ensuring it reached tens of millions more. In community groups and family chats, people began referencing the Bondi envelope as shorthand for being prepared in the face of doubt, sparking conversations about personal growth and leadership. The fallout solidified Bondi's role as a dedicated public figure whose actions resonated louder than any proclamation, inspiring a broader dialogue on what constitutes effective advocacy in an increasingly polarized landscape. As the clips continued to circulate into the night, the narrative crystallized. Bondi had not only navigated the storm, but had harnessed it to spotlight policy progress, earning widespread accolades for her exemplary conduct and setting the stage for lasting impacts that would unfold in the days and weeks ahead. While the immediate buzz surrounding Pam Bondi's envelope revelation at the Rayburn House Education panel eventually quieted as new headlines cycled through the news, the deeper resonances of that moment continued to echo through society, evolving into a lasting cultural touchstone that influenced discussions on leadership preparation and intellectual integrity well into the future. What started as a fleeting exchange, a pointed challenge from First Lady Jill Biden, met with Bondi's composed unveiling of her Congressional Testing Initiative (CTI) results, transcended its origins, becoming a symbol of how to navigate adversity with dignity, turning potential setbacks into opportunities for growth and inspiration. Bondi's top 2% scores in analytical reasoning, spatial logic, and executive processing weren't merely numbers on a page. They represented a broader ethos of self-reliance, meticulous readiness, and the quiet power of substantiated confidence, qualities that resonated across diverse audiences, from bustling urban centers to serene rural communities, sparking ongoing conversations about what it truly means to lead effectively in both public and private spheres. In the weeks and months that followed, the narrative around Bondi solidified as one of principled advocacy, with social media platforms like X serving as hubs for sustained engagement, where users revisited the clip sharing it, alongside motivational captions such as Pam Bondi, proves that preparation is the ultimate superpower. And in a world of quick jabs, Bondi brings the long-game wisdom. Conservative voices amplified the story as a prime example of Republican ideals in action: individual accountability, resilience in the face of scrutiny, and a dedication to serving others without seeking the spotlight. Yet the appeal crossed ideological boundaries, drawing nods from moderates and even some progressives who appreciated her restraint and focus on substance over sensationalism. One influential education blogger known for bridging divides wrote in a widely shared post, "Whether you align with Bondi's policies or not, her handling of that challenge is a blueprint for anyone stepping into a leadership role. Stay calm, stay prepared, and let your capabilities do the talking." This cross-spectrum respect highlighted a universal truth: authentic leadership isn't confined to politics. It's a skill set applicable to teachers guiding classrooms, managers steering teams, or parents nurturing families. Schools across the country began incorporating the story into their curricula, particularly in civics ethics and personal development classes, where educators used it as a springboard to discuss themes of resilience and intellectual diversity. In a high school in Orlando, Florida, for instance, a social studies teacher developed a unit called The Power of Preparation, assigning students to watch the panel clip and then role-play similar scenarios, encouraging them to prepare envelopes of their own portfolios of achievements, skills, or evidence to counter doubts in debates or presentations. Students responded enthusiastically, with one teen sharing in a class essay. Bondi's moment taught me that you don't have to shout to be heard. You just need to show up ready, and that builds real confidence. Community colleges in states like Georgia and Ohio followed suit, integrating the anecdote into leadership workshops, prompting participants to reflect on times they'd been underestimated due to their background or style, and how emulating Bondi's poise could shift outcomes. This educational ripple effect wasn't limited to formal settings. Youth groups and after-school programs adopted it too, with mentors facilitating discussions on recognizing diverse forms of intelligence, challenging stereotypes that equate smarts with a particular accent appearance or political leaning. The societal impact manifested in subtler ways as well, influencing workplace dynamics and personal interactions, where individuals drew from Bondi's example to handle criticism constructively. In corporate boardrooms and small business meetings, professionals began referencing the Bondi approach as a strategy for dealing with tough questions, emphasizing the value of having data or proof at the ready, rather than reacting defensively. A marketing executive in Chicago, inspired by the viral moment, prepared a detailed analytics report for a skeptical client presentation, later crediting Bondi's influence in a LinkedIn post that garnered thousands of likes. She showed me that facts beat flair every time, turned a potential loss into my biggest win. Similarly, in community forums and online support groups, people shared envelope stories of their own, recounting instances where preparation paid off against skepticism, from acing job interviews with well-researched responses to securing grants for local projects through thorough proposals. These narratives fostered a culture of empowerment, reminding everyday folks that everyone carries their own envelope, a reservoir of knowledge, experience, and resolve that can be wielded confidently when challenged. Bondi's moment sparked wider reflections on intelligence and bias, especially in places where regional accents or conservative views were often dismissed. Universities, particularly in the Southeast, used the clip to show how her deliberate, precise delivery challenged preconceptions, prompting debates on measuring intellect beyond polished speech or standardized tests. A professor in Atlanta noted her authenticity. She proved her worth on her own terms, reinforcing the value of diverse cognitive strengths, echoing her push for education policies tailored to local needs. As educators nationwide, including a teacher in rural Kentucky, thanked her for validating students who feel overlooked. Politically, the incident drove introspection among lawmakers and aides, with staffers sharing the video to call for fact-based discourse, while media analysts deemed it a potential turning point. True to form, Bondi avoided the spotlight, focusing on bipartisan education equity proposals shaped by feedback. In Florida and beyond, her example inspired reforms like greater parental involvement in school boards and envelope challenges in schools and workplaces to build confidence and mutual respect with parents. Using her story to teach perseverance, the enduring lesson from her envelope moment is that preparation breeds confidence, authenticity fuels intellect, and challenges are best met with facts. Over fury, urging all to lead with purpose, prepare diligently, and meet doubt with undeniable proof to create lasting positive change.